For those of you who are watching live, thanks so much for joining us. Feel free to comment and ask questions in the YouTube or Facebook Live comments, and we will try and get to them if we have time. We have a fantastic panel today. Super excited. Today, we are talking about digital influencers and all the different worlds that touches. We have social media managers, creatives, the whole nine yards, everything you can imagine digital we've got here. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Macy, if you don't mind kicking us off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Macy Burkett, and my full-time job, I'm the marketing coordinator for the Rec Center on KU's campus. So I have a team of 4 student employees. 2 of them help me with social media, and then I have a designer and a videographer and a photographer. So we do all the marketing you see in the building, everything on the website, everything on our social. And on the side, I also have a true crime podcast with my dad called Cocktails of Crime and Fashion. So check it out if you're interested. And I also do fashion and home styling on the side. So my education is in fashion marketing and music, actually, vocal performance. And then I have a master's in digital content strategy. So very interested in digital marketing. It's what I do every day. And I love creating content and working in this field.
Awesome. Carolyn, you're next on my screen.
All right. I'm Carolyn Cohen. I am currently at H&R Block at our corporate headquarters. I was going to say downtown in Kansas City, but I'm in my house, as is pretty much everybody. So someday we'll get back there. But I'm a senior marketing manager as part of our product and experience team, and specifically, I lead our social media practice at Block. I graduated from KU in 2011 with journalism and psychology degrees, and have had, different experience since then from ad agencies. And then prior to Block, I was at Garmin, also in a social media role there. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. We're going to go around the horn. Joshua, go ahead.
Cool. I'm Joshua Smith. I'm a senior social media manager at Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud network. So I recently just started that position a couple months ago. I actually move into LA next week, but I am born and raised from Kansas City. I graduated from KU in 2017 with a strategic communications degree. So shout out to the J School. Since graduating, I've kind of hopped around from agency to agency. I've worn the red pigtails as Wendy's at VML Y&R. I've worked at other independent agencies in the city, and really happy to just speak with everybody today.
Awesome. Chris, take us home.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Kennedy. I'm an associate creative director at VML Y&R. I'm on Team BASF, so working on a lot of agriculture brands. But prior to that, worked in a bunch of different ad agencies. I worked in comedy for a long time as well. I worked at The Onion for 3.5, 4 years. And what I do every day is I just try to find ways with my team to make the communications between brands and everyday people suck a little less and just feel a little bit more real. It's going to suck, but we try to make it suck a little less.
Awesome. I love it. Well, this is for everybody, but, I imagine students, as they're trying to brainstorm what kind of careers they're looking for, they want to know, what drew you to this field? What is it about it that excited you, that, Macy, you especially, like you had mentioned, you had your undergrad in fashion, and then you switched and got your master's. So maybe if you don't mind kicking us off, but anyone, tell what drew you to the digital world?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Kansas City, and not a lot of fashion companies here. And I didn't want to sing opera my whole life. So I thought, I like posting on Instagram. I'm going to figure out how you work in social media. So I got an internship with a nonprofit in Kansas City called Rightfully Sown, and I was their social media intern for a while. And it was kind of fashion related, but it really introduced me to the world of social media. And I've also done the social for the West 18th Street Fashion Show in the city. And I've worked at agencies doing social media and worked at a bridal store. So I've kind of been all over the place, but I have found that social is where my heart is. And I love it because it can combine so many of my interests in fashion, but also opens me up to new worlds like collegiate rec that I never thought that knew anything about. And now I know a lot about it. So here we are.
Awesome. Anyone else? What attracted you to your space?
Yeah, I can go. Macy, I'll have to connect with you afterwards because I also worked at the rec center when I was a student.
Oh, okay.
So, seen that side of things a little bit. But I think for me, even though I work generally in a field that I studied, my actual job was not something I think ever that even came up in my undergrad as an option or as a career path. Granted, social media is newer and, probably was not on the radar as much when I was in school. But, I just kind of saw my career evolve a certain way and I just kind of went with it. And I think that's what a lot of people who've dabbled in social media have done, because there's not a super clear-cut path even still where you're not majoring in social media. You may not be graduating knowing this is what I want to do, and your first job may not even be doing that, but every little step along the way kind of helped me figure out what I did want to do, but it wasn't clear on a graduation day.
Yeah, I agree. I think I got into this field purely just because I didn't want to be bored every day. I didn't want to show up and do the exact same thing every single day. In fact, like I graduated from the journalism school in 2007. Wow, I don't like that I put a label to that. That hurt. But I got a job right out the gates working for a company here in Kansas City, Hallmark Cards, but they rejected me as a creative person. They put me on their marketing team for a little while, and it was no harm, no foul. But I could just start to see the path of it felt very one foot in front of the other. And that just felt really, I don't know, really not challenging, not interesting, and not really for me. And so I just really wanted something that I could go with the wind a little bit and kind of see that my career is more of an outline and just be interested in that, how that journey took place and what kind of happy accidents would happen, and just trusting that the skills that I learned at KU and the people that I met at KU, I could land on my feet anywhere, even if I failed.
Yeah, for me, I would probably say it's something along the lines of what everybody else is mentioning, but I just love the fact that we have the opportunity to shape culture. So it's like the things that we're talking about, the things that we're doing, the things that we're introducing are the things that eventually could have, tons and tons of people talking about the things that you started talking about. And so that's what's really cool about, digital marketing and working on the internet and working on social, is because, to Chris's point, it's never the same every day. It's like I don't wake up and hope to talk about the things that we're talking about today with just even the news that came out last night. But it's cool that we get to work with these brands and make sure that they're relevant and they're speaking up when they need to. And I think that that's a really cool career to go into for sure.
That's awesome. Well, and one thing that I imagine y'all get this question a lot, but I'm just curious because I think it's really valuable. What is one of the biggest misconceptions people have about your role? That, especially when you're in the digital space, people have preconceived notions of what it is you do every day. And the low hanging fruit I can probably guess is that you are just scrolling through Twitter and Instagram all day. That's your job. And I know it goes way more than that. So tell us a little bit about that misconception, other misconceptions that, when you're talking to students or friends or family, oh, you're actually doing that. What comes to mind?
I think that's the biggest one, that always, like what I said, what I thought it was, just posting on Instagram when I was in college. And it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of data to look into. And I learned a ton in my master's degree, all the kinds of things that you can research to make your brand more known on social. There's just, and there's so many platforms for pulling data, and there's just a lot goes into it. It's a lot of numbers and not just pretty pictures and witty captions.
Yeah, and I would say a big misconception is that it's easy, just because we all do it in our personal lives, but that's a completely different skill set than how we have to think about it on a professional level. It involves data, like Macy was saying. It involves having a strategic plan, even if it's a weekly plan. It involves lawyers. Nobody likes that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's a lot of weirdly, it's a lot of selling internally to the people that you work with, your own team, any clients that you may be working with. So there's a lot of thought and a lot of people that go into every single post, and most people just think, I have a phone, so I can do this. This is easy, and it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Chris and Macy said. One thing I'd add too is that maybe there's a little bit of a misconception that it's a job for 22-year-olds and that's it. And, that people age out or they burn out of working in this field, but that's obviously not the case. And, there's people who have made a career of this for 10, 15 years. And now, again, that may have changed what they're doing. They're not doing the same thing they were doing when they were just getting started. But I think, when I was first getting into it, I definitely feel like I was hired because I was a young person and therefore must be savvy in this field. Now, I think, and I can't speak for everybody. I know when I hire people now, that's certainly not the case. There are people who are coming out of the gate with experience, with interest. So, I mean, it's definitely changed a lot in that respect.
Yeah, I think there's something to add to that I'm just even still discovering and uncovering, as I'm growing within my experiences, that and this is a misconception also when you're scrolling through LinkedIn, is you'll see people trying to hire for social positions and they expect you to do any and everything involved with social, when there's a lot of unique positions. Like I've done focused on community management, I focused on the content creation, I focused on strategy, but those were all at different positions at different times with different people. And so the one thing that I would say to people that are interested in going into this field is to kind of breathe for a second and understand that there's lots of different routes that you can go with it, and you can find what's the best fit for you. I mean, I started out being more of a creative, like Chris is saying, and now I'm at a position where I'm a lot more strategic, and I'm kind of diving into data and whatnot and kind of leaning on those things much more than I once was holding a camera or being in Photoshop or Premiere.
Awesome. That's really interesting. And we're already getting some questions in. So for those who are watching live and you want to comment either on YouTube or Facebook with a question, we are absolutely going to try and get to it. Maddie has a question that, it ties in a little bit to what we've been talking about, just as students who are preparing to make that jump. I'm curious, for J School alums, but really all of y'all are just have great experience with this. Is there something looking back you wish you had more practice with as a student? Something that that might have greased the skids a little bit that first year or two and made it an easier transition, whether it's something really technical, like, working with a certain social media platform, or, just practice with writing or whatever it is. Anything come to mind as something you wish you had practiced more?
I think for me, I wish I would have paid attention to the process more and less of the assignment. So I think when I was in school, I was focusing on how do I just get this done so I can turn it in on Thursday and then go turn up for the weekend or whatever. I mean, just being very, very, very forward about it. I think if I would have been paying a little bit more attention to the fact of just there is a process to this and there's a purpose to that process, I think it would have helped me, in my first year or two coming out of school, because that's a really important thing that's going to help you. Because especially with social, for example, with how quick it moves, having a process in place is so necessary, because it helps with time management, and with how fast that things are constantly moving, you need to get things out the door. It's my biggest piece of advice would just to be pay attention to that process, because I do think that, I can't remember the exact class, but in J School specifically, we're working on, I think we did WD-40 as our product, and we're working on the example, how are we going to sell this product and everything. And I remember having that aha moment when I got out of school, and I was like, okay, wait, that kind of connected a little bit, but what did we do after this step or after that step or before, and so that's probably what I would emphasize as process.
Yeah, I think, and Marshall, you kind of referenced this specific to J School, but I think, probably with any professional school or any major at KU, yes, writing is involved and you have writing assignments and there's papers and things like that. But I think understanding how to write in the professional world is a little different. And I mean, obviously the pandemic is kind of an outlier to that, but the amount of work we do via email, even via chats, knowing how to craft a well-oiled presentation even is a huge piece of, my job every day. And kind of like Chris said, like selling work internally is a huge piece of my job, and knowing how to represent that in a professional way, but in a conversational way, it's a difficult balance. And I think that's something that is not a skill that is practiced during school until you're out of it.
Yeah, and I think those are both very great points. I agree wholeheartedly. I think the one that I would add to it is twofold. It's one, making the mental shift of thinking of this field as not just like communications, but problem solving. And as soon as you can like think of things as a problem, then and using communications, regardless of how that looks, as the tool or the solutions to those, you start to make more interesting stuff and you make more interesting choices. And I think the other thing that I wish I would have worked harder on was hanging out with the news info side people a little bit more, because I think a lot of, at least for my job and what I do, a lot of times the value I bring into the room is I ask the hardest questions in the room, because that's where the real problems lie, or in those assumptions that, well, our organization or like this influencer, he's always worked like this, or this is how this company has always worked. But being able to ask those questions, those harder questions, those whys, in a respectful way, and try to find those places that people haven't really discovered yet. I think the news info side teaches that really, really well. Strat Commie, we're just so focused on, well, how do we fill the box? How do we just make a thing? And it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I agree with everyone as well. To Carolyn's point, so my undergrads come from K-State, my undergrad degrees, my master's is from KU, and in my fashion degree, we actually had a professional development class, and it was extremely helpful. We did a mock interview, and we did personal branding, and any practice that you can get with that, or even just talking to people in a professional way in this field will come in huge handy. When I worked at one of the agencies I worked at in Overland Park, that was my first bigger agency, and I didn't realize how many meetings you would have a day and like how many people you talk to. And it's not just your coworkers, it's clients. So you have to really know how to speak to people and how to write in emails as well. So I thought that was a great point.
I gotcha. Well, one thing that I am kind of struck by is y'all have talked about a variety of different skills. So you've talked about the communication, you mentioned problem solving, you even mentioned kind of like selling internally. And, maybe that's the biggest group, but what other kinds of skills are necessary to work within your given role or, previous roles, because y'all represent such a different wealth of different types in the industry. And I'm really fascinated by this because, those three things, while they're in every job, y'all have talked about them like, no, this is, top 2, top 3. And, like I said, as someone who doesn't know anything, that's really interesting. So what other kind of skills come to mind as you think through, to be successful at my job, or I'm looking to hire someone, they need to have X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on this one. I think it's active listening. And we say communications, that's such a big, broad term, but active listening, and what I mean by that is really shutting up and listening to what people are saying. Because people who work in the communications field, we tend to think that everybody can communicate, and that's not the case. Most people don't have the gift of voice. And so a lot of what is important is being able to decipher the words that like a client or, an influencer I'm going to work with, what they're saying, so that I can find the root problems to how I can actually help with that. And with active listening comes another really, really important skill, which is empathy. I think being so empathetic to the end person that we're going to be talking to, because so many of our, and I'm sure everybody on this call can agree, is like everybody that we're talking to, we have the end person in mind. I could give a crap about what I'm supposed to be selling as an advertising creative. I give 100% of a crap about how this comes across in your feed, or how we can add value or give you something interesting, because really we're asking people to give us their time. So how do we use that as a gift? So I'd say empathy and active listening.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I hope I'm not alone in this, but I'm sure most of us have posted something that didn't go over 100% the way we thought it would to an audience. So I think it was really good thing to say that you care so much about the end person who's going to see your posts. Something more on the hard skills aspect that has helped me is just knowing the basics of photography, and Adobe or Canva help a lot in my position, working with students who are my students are really the experts on that sort of thing. That's why I hire them. But just knowing just some verbiage, and so that you can direct them in what you want from them, is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with all the skills and points Macy and Chris made. I would also add just time management. I know that's a really basic one. But while you're still in school, yes, you're balancing classwork, maybe you have a job on the side, and then, any sort of like social life as well. And, you still have that work-life balance when you're working full time, but there isn't somebody looking over your shoulder telling you how to spend every minute of your day. And yeah, you have deadlines, but it's more on you to determine the priority of those projects and where things have push and pull, and where you can be flexible and what's not flexible. And sometimes those are mistakes that you make, and then you learn as you go. But that's something I always look for in anybody I'm working with, is that they have that ability to manage projects like for themselves.
Yeah, Carolyn actually took mine. I was going to say something along those lines, or with multitasking, but I think one that's also something that I really had to learn when I first got my first job out of school was just being honest. And I mean, it's being honest with yourself and being honest with your coworkers. So, especially when I started out with a position where it's like I have to do 5 videos in a week or this many posts or whatever. And it's just making sure that you're being honest with what you can deliver. So it's like I don't want to ever overpromise and underdeliver, because that's just going to make me look bad. That's going to make our agency look bad. That's going to make the client look bad. And I think that, the more that I've worked at it and everything, and I've just been very straightforward about what you can expect from me, like, people are fine with that. As long as you're honest, then we can work together to make sure that we're going to stay on track with what we want to do. So just be honest.
Awesome. That's all really interesting and super relatable, especially with the time management one, Carolyn. That's just a hard transition for everyone. For those who are watching live, like I said before, please feel free to comment or put questions into the chat, and we will try and get to them. I do want to go to one of our questions there. Corey asked an interesting question of, in your respective careers, was there a career setback you faced which you later realized was an advantage? And I'm going to add a little bit on to Corey's question, because maybe you don't have one that's coming to mind. But also, how would you encourage upcoming graduates, early career individuals, to handle setbacks? Macy, you mentioned a social media post that was not well received. We all have stumbles early in the career, and especially, some, depending on your background, that could be your first real stumble, or, it just feels like another one in a long list. So what kind of things come to mind for y'all there?
Well, I can start. Yeah, there was that post, and it wasn't anything bad, but my team, we were in Overland Park, Kansas, and this client was in the South. So there was just something, it was about Memorial Day, and, in the South, it's just a different culture. So what we posted just didn't come across how we intended. So there was that. But everything worked out okay. It was a-okay. Something else though that was a challenge for me was when I worked in an agency, I came to the conclusion that agency life was not for me. And you really have to have a certain, it takes a certain type of person to work in an agency. You know, you have to work with a lot of different clients and have to be, you know, we all have to be tough in our careers, but I realized that I enjoyed working with students. And in my current job at KU, I have a really great leadership role in my position. And, you know, sometimes what you think you want to do, because I was sure I wanted to work in an agency, you quickly realize that's not the direction you want to go. So that was kind of a setback where I had to reflect and think, okay, how do I want to use my social media degree or my digital content strategy degree, and what do I want to do with it? And you just have to figure out what you want to do and what you enjoy.
Yeah, Macy's being really nice. Being in the agency world can suck real bad. Just to let everybody know, it's definitely not for everybody. I've left it a couple times, and to that, I mean, it's a good segue to the setback in my career. After KU, after I graduated in 2007, I found out the last semester at KU that I should probably become a copywriter by trade. I had a new teacher, new to the J school, who told me, hey, you should think about writing for a living. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like me. I did the research, got into a portfolio school, more of the traditional route to become a creative in the ad industry, in the marketing industry. And I graduated in about 08, 09, and there were no jobs. There were zero, because the economy had bottomed out. And what a huge career setback that is, not getting a job like right out the gates. I had a job, that Hallmark job that I mentioned previously. I had that for about like 4 weeks, and then I quit it to go to this graduate school. So I took a huge gamble, and there was no job. But what that actually did for me was a ton. One, it humbled me and not made me think that I deserve to be in the industry, deserve to be making stuff that, you know, hopefully becomes culture. But the other thing is it really made me get scrappy and figuring out different ways, different avenues, and understanding that that my career is going to be like a thumbprint. It should be unique to me. I should be able to pivot. It might not be the way that I thought it would look, but that's actually better, and it's more interesting, and it's more powerful, and it's more mine. And so it took a lot of me sitting in my parents' house, drinking beers in the basement, but I figured it out. And I'm really, really thankful that I didn't get a job right out the gate.
Yeah, I'll add one as well. I think one, I wouldn't call it maybe a setback, but just mistake or stumble, as others have put it, that I've seen happen to myself, and then I've subsequently seen it happen to others, is struggling with, and actually I think this relates to actually another question that was asked in the chat, just like your personal authenticity and what your client or company you want to that you're working with, where that balance strikes. And sometimes that can be really difficult, and you may find yourself in a situation where you are pushing for something and it almost feels like an argument, or it just feels like a conflict with, maybe it's a supervisor, maybe it's a client, to say, you know, I really think this is the right thing for us to do. And whether that is on the spectrum of social issues, whether it's as simple as social media best practices, you know, this video is too long for Instagram, right? Like, it may just be as straightforward and basic as that. But just speaking up and finding your own voice, and it's easier said than done, but that's something that I always encourage people to do, and make sure that you feel good about the work that you're doing, because otherwise you're going to go home at night and say, like, what have I done?
Yeah, to the point of humility, I think when I was graduating from school, I have a history where while I was in school at KU, I was professionally reviewing technology for like professional blogs. So by the time I graduated, I was like, all right, bet. Like now I need to get like the dopest job of all time. And I was putting applications out. The only thing I got was an internship at a local agency. And I looked at that as a huge setback. I was talking to my mom and I was just like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. This is not what I'm supposed to do. And finally, she came around. She made me realize this is where I need to be. I ended up doing the internship and I ended up learning so much more. Like I knew far less than I actually like thought I knew. And that was like a huge advantage going through the internship. And I ended up actually did getting hired halfway through the internship because I just came in and applied myself within that position. But I would just tell you is like take any and every opportunity whenever I have opportunity to speak to students. I would just definitely recommend don't like scoff at an internship or scoff at opportunities to shadow because those things will turn into advantages from those experiences. Whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now, you'll learn from each and every experience you gain.
That's awesome. That's really great insight. Thank you all for sharing. Really appreciate it. I'm curious, just as like I said, I'm not someone who's in the industry every day. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face on a daily basis? It's a pretty broad, open-ended question, so y'all can take it wherever you want. But y'all have touched on a lot of different things that I imagine can sometimes be frustrating or challenging.
Yeah, one thing that I see as a challenge, and not just specific to social, but I think just with digital in general, is kind of the focus group of one, right? So, your colleague or supervisor or client, whomever, they see something in their digital environment, whether that is Instagram, whether it's shopping online, whether it's a banner ad they're served or an email, and they're seeing that, and maybe they think that's the greatest thing in the world, maybe they think it's terrible, but trying to always explain why people are seeing what they're seeing, why they're not seeing what other people are seeing. Not everyone is the target for every single brand and every single product. And that can be kind of a complicated concept to explain. And, I know that's something that I've faced a lot where, you may love Nike as the brand and you may love the content that they're putting out on their Instagram. Does that mean it's right for H&R Block to employ the same strategy? Maybe not. Maybe sometimes, maybe elements from that. And so just trying to connect those dots for people within your organization is a challenge, but, not something that can't be overcome.
I can very much relate to that challenge. I'm the only marketing person on our team. And like I said, I do all the marketing. So I get a lot of people knocking on my office door saying, I saw this at Walmart. Let's do this at the rec. And I have to explain, well, we're attracting students, or, here's why that wouldn't work. Or someone will see something on Instagram and it's just not right for us. And I have to have the knowledge to explain thoughtfully and in a way that would help, like in layman's terms, explain why that would or would not work for us. So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I'd say definitely that, and this is pretty close to that. It's getting everybody that you work with, whether it's on your team or otherwise, to understand kind of something what Joshua said a little while ago. Your brand, whether it's your own personal brand or a brand that you're working for, you don't have to be everywhere at once. You don't have to be on. There's no reason that Charmin should have Charmin toilet paper should have a Twitter. Why? What do they have to say on Twitter? Like, there's no reason. You know what I mean? And but getting people to understand that, because everybody isn't keeping their eyes on their own test. Everybody's looking at what everybody else is doing all the time, instead of just focusing on what are we about? Who am I as a personal brand? Who am I as a corporate brand? Just keeping focused on your own paper and doing what's right for you, instead of trying to make it like some weird high school popularity contest.
Awesome. I'm curious. We had another question thrown in the chat, and this might be a little in the weeds, but Melinda was wondering, there's so much competition for attention on social media. How do you differentiate your message? And that we can expand that to not just social media, but to just marketing in general, because I think y'all kind of touched on that a little bit of how what's good for Nike, what's good for Walmart may not be good for Charmin, and may not be good for the KU Rec. And I'm just curious, what is the decision-making paradigm that y'all face as you try and navigate what I imagine is really crowded waters?
I think, that's something where specifically for me in my new position at LOL Network that we're trying to do, because like I'm the first dedicated social person that this company has ever had. So you can pretty much assume how crazy that has been. But with that, with creating the strategy of just trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually activate on this space effectively to where we can really grow these channels? And I think the number one thing that I'm leaning on right now is listening to my audience and knowing who my audience is. And so it's like, we're fortunate enough to date where we have like 250 something thousand on Instagram and everything like that. But when it comes to just like comedy, it's thick. Everybody on the internet have to find that way. Oh, sorry, I got a little connection thing. But we have to find the right way when everybody else is trying to do. Really see what are the things that our audience is, listening to that data that's informing you. Okay, they're this old, so think a little bit older when you're thinking about the copy in this way. Or let's say they have this kind of background, so maybe it's a little tone deaf for you to talk about those subjects. And I think that those things will really help you define how you're going to compete in the space by understanding who you're speaking with. And then also to that note, also understand what everybody else is doing. I just finished a competitive audit where I took 25 different brands and I said, this is what they're doing. This is what's working for them. This is not what's working for them. So audience is the thing that I would emphasize here.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's 101, but it's definitely at least 201, if not 301, if we're going to teach a class. And another way of saying it is, as soon as you try to be something for everyone, you're going to be nothing for everyone. So be everything for one person. Like really define who your specific audience is, even if it's your own personal channel. Who's that one person you're talking to? It's so weird that it ends up talking to everybody in that way, but it's because your voice and your point of view on the world is going to be so specific, and it's going to be purely your piece of land to own. It's going to be purely your flag to own. So audience.
And for us, each channel is a different audience. We have a much younger audience on Instagram than we do on Facebook. So I'm always telling my students, let's not post this meme to Facebook. Let's keep it to Instagram and Twitter, or just Twitter. And what we do is we lean into the trends that we're seeing on our own social or on our own Twitter, like memes that are trending, and we put our own KU Rec spin on it. We did a Baby Yoda meme back when that was cool. So we like to lean into the trends that we're all seeing, and I'll ask my team, what are you guys loving on social right now? Like, what's funny? What do you think we can do? I'm close to their age, but I'm getting a little too old to. I keep getting older. They stay the same age, so I'm starting to drift away from those trends. But that's how we do it for us.
Awesome. I'm curious and I imagine y'all get this a lot, but what would you say is, as you look into the crystal ball, are there any upcoming changes or going to be shifts in how the industry works for y'all as you try and connect with your audience of one, whatever that looks like? Is there something that students should be mindful of as they are, pitching themselves to organizations and agencies, that they can be better prepared for what the future of digital looks like?
Yeah, I can start on this one. I think probably this is sort of a non-answer, but the only inevitable thing is that, it will change. And I think probably for everybody on the panel today, we have seen it change, whether that's in the last 6 months or in the last 10 years. So just having the ability to be flexible. This is a small anecdote, but I was listening to something the other day on a podcast, and they were talking about how a stat that is so commonly referenced for, ideal number of hashtags, like something very, very basic. If you dig and you dig and you dig, it is from a study from 2010. And like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's very old, right? In the sense of the internet. And yet people sometimes still reference it, or, people see that as like, this is the answer, because when I Google it, that's the top result. But I think just knowing that what was a best practice 6 months ago may change, and you just have to be cognizant of your audience, like we've been saying, and also of what your data shows. It sounds like a lot of us have had different jobs throughout our career, and knowing that what was the standard at one job may be very different somewhere else, and that may be just the company's practice. It could also be based on the company's audience and the data that you have access to.
Yeah, I'd say one thing that's definitely, I think it's here, but I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion in the industry for at least a couple of years, is the creepiness factor. Every time you interact, and I'm sure everybody, who's going to see this video or is currently watching has seen some version of like that Netflix documentary, I forget, The Social Dilemma. There is a lot of data that is out there, and you're exchanging, your personal information, your privacy for this communication thing. So having to be good stewards of what you do with that, and how do you use that info, and knowing how to fight back even against sometimes your own clients and saying that's not the right thing to do. So being a good steward of what that privacy and that data is, and on a just kind of like on a weird moral level, just doing the right thing with it. Just because you can do some really, really creepy stuff with that data and with that communication, and it's not necessarily the best thing to do for anybody.
Awesome. That study is really interesting, just especially when you consider Carolyn, Twitter had been around for 3 years or something like that in 2010. So, it's now been around 3 or 4 times as long, but still that word of truth is from its inception. That's a really good point. I do want to put y'all on the spot a little bit. This wasn't a question that y'all gave me this question as y'all were talking. I'm curious, where do y'all go for inspiration or creativity? We had Melinda ask, what brands, people, organizations are innovative in their social media. So where do y'all do when you're kind of feeling stuck, or you're just trying to look for something fresh? What's kind of a go-to, whether it's borrowing from someone else or, doing an activity that gets you going? What comes to mind when it's like, okay, I have to think of something new today?
I think to the point of that, what's really important is work-life balance, because I consider myself to be somebody who is pretty creative, but I notice that when I don't do the things that help me feel like me, I'm not creative, and I don't feel inspired, and I don't feel any light bulbs going off when I'm seeing other people's stuff. And so for me, it's literally as simple as, sometimes in the morning I'll play video games for like 30 minutes, or I'll go and listen to some music. But I think outside of that, more practically, to like, who are the people that actually inspire me? I follow a lot of different artists on Instagram that are doing weird things, the kind of things where it's like, there's one guy named Alex MDC who literally like takes pop culture icons and shows kind of the other pop culture icon that lives inside of that character. And it's kind of funny how, like, when I just see that, it kind of just makes me kind of decode like normal messages and normal things that I see and never accept it for just what it is. And that kind of leads me on this path to unraveling and starting getting creative with that. So there's definitely a lot of artists that inspire me. And then it's also just being aware of, still, for like working in the comedy space, while, we might get jealous of the competition and everything, sometimes they're doing dope stuff, and we have to humble ourselves and go and see that. So with Kevin Hart's LOL network, it's looking at like Westbrook, like what is Will Smith's company doing? How are they innovating the game and stuff like that? And just really being aware of the space that you live in personally, while also the space that you live in when it comes to your job, and kind of blending the two.
Yeah, I'd say it's that, and it's going back to what Joshua said about the process. It's having your own process for making sure that you're open to new ideas when you're not thinking about them. So whether that's carrying a little notebook with you at all times, and if something strikes you, hey, great. One thing that I try to mentor younger creatives in is keeping an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Docs of just heroes. Like one of my heroes is this designer out of New York. He used to teach at the School of Visual Arts, which is funny because he got kicked out of the School of Visual Arts and then they asked him back as a teacher. But James Victore, he's an incredible poster designer. I'm a writer by trade. There's nothing in common between me and him, but the way that he approaches his work, the way that he sees the world, I dig that vibe. So he's a hero to me. So finding all these heroes, whether it's in food, whether it's in art, whether it's in design, whether it's in just innovation, which is its whole industry of itself, being curious about stuff outside of your realm, you'll bring all those puzzle pieces when it comes time to make the stuff that you need to make for your clients or for yourself.
I like to make, similar to Joshua, to make myself feel inspired, I need to be getting creative often. I'm also a very creative person. My husband and I do a lot of DIY home projects. So when we have a weekend of just doing that, I come to the new week really refreshed. And for work specifically, for my full-time job, I'm really inspired just being on campus. We are on campus 3 times a week, even though we're still in the pandemic. But just being around that energy and being around the students, and like I said, I often ask them what they're seeing, what they're liking right now. That just helps me at work, aside from doing my own thing and then coming back refreshed. So.
Yeah, I was just going to add too, in addition to kind of what everybody shared there, this sounds like very nerdy, but I also am in a lot of like Facebook groups and follow a lot of Twitter lists of other people in the industry. So yeah, you can follow, I used Nike earlier, so I'll just use them again. You can follow Nike, but you can also find the Nike creatives and the Nike social media team. And I follow a lot of those people themselves just because I think it's interesting to see what they are talking about. But then in terms of like, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups with other kind of client side social media managers. And it's really interesting, just, everybody's kind of dealing with similar issues or has the same questions, whether it's technical or whether it's something more creative. And I think that really helps me to keep my radar on other brands outside of just, my little bubble of what's, what I'm the target audience for, that I get the ads for and that I follow, because that's not all that's out there. And that's not the only, brands that I should be drawing inspiration from.
For sure. That's all really interesting. I do want to start to land the plane because y'all have been so great. And so we're going to end on kind of hopefully a fun question of just what's your favorite thing about a typical day or the non-typical day, since I imagine y'all have quite a variety of days depending on what sort of projects you're working on. But, just what's something that you like to share that like, this is why my job is awesome?
Well, I've said it a million times. I like being around college students, and I think they're really fun. It's always a fun time at work, and yeah, I think I make it a point to spend time like chatting with my students and just making them feel like I care about them as people, and because I do. I mean, it's not that I want them to feel that. I really do, and I even my coworkers, we always like to chat and take some time to like debrief from what we're all doing, because we all have very different jobs in the building, and just catch up with each other. And I think that's another really important part of working full time, is get to know the people that you work with, because you spend a lot of time with them. So
yeah, that's kind of mine too. I don't work with college students, but I would say it's the people. Yeah, it's because, especially at least on my side of things in the agency world, I say that the agency world attracts a lot of broken dreamers, and with that comes a lot of optimistic cynicism. And so being able to just rally around and share beers or share lunch with people who just speak your language, so you can just exchange war stories, just to be able to vibe on that same level with a group of people is so important, because at least to me, I don't really care what logo you play for. I'm in it for the people, because if you only care what you make, you're going to get rudely awakened that half the stuff that you make, if not 3/4 of the stuff you make, you won't like, because like, I don't care about it. A lot of the things I made, because I'm not in that industry. I'm not in that world. So just being true to who you are and bringing some of yourself so that you can be those things for the people around you is just so fun. It reminds you you're not alone, even in the pandemic.
Aw. I totally agree with all of that. I would just add to, like, sometimes it does bring some like brevity to the day, to, yes, when things are going badly, or if it's stressful, or, whatever that is, to say, okay, we are not heart surgeons here. The world is going to go on. Everything will be okay. And sometimes, when you're like so in it and so in the weeds, it's hard to feel that way. But I personally like that aspect of it, because it makes me feel better at the end of the day if I'm signing off and I'm like, okay, it's fine. I had a issue with a previous client once where I used the word popsicle and we should not have referenced something as popsicle. And I remember like being almost in tears. I'm like, I came home to my husband, was complaining to him, and he was like, just like replay what you just said, and like, you should feel okay. And I was like, you're right. You're right. Everything's okay.
Yeah, I would say just keep it lighthearted. For me, it's like what makes me really enjoy it is I specifically like to do my work through making people laugh. And so it's like some people won't understand like how many days or how many hours go into this post, but like what's really rewarding is when I see people enjoying it and sharing it. And every now and then you'll even see some people dropping some really heartfelt, oh my gosh, I'm going through this, and this is hilarious. Like this made me smile. And like those are moments where it's like, okay, yeah, hold up, this is cool. Like what I do matters, because it's very easy to get caught in the weeds. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like when you're looking for jobs, and it's not always going to be this way where you're going to find this speaks directly to my soul, but if you can at least find something wherever you're at that it can at least make you smile and make you feel happy about what you're doing, then you're in the right place, and lean on that every single day when you go into the office or when you open up your computer.
Awesome. That's really cool. And yeah, y'all have been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. For those students who are watching and you want to learn more, you can reach out to us at the Career Center. We are here for you wherever you're at in your career journey. I want to thank our panelists for joining us. That y'all have been really insightful and interesting. And I know that we've had a lot of viewers who are chiming in. And so thank you for taking the time to do this. So thank you to everyone who is watching. Reach out to us at the Career Center, and we are here to help you. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.